The Grumman F4F Wildcat, designed by the Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, entered service in 1940 with the United States Navy and the British Royal Navy, where it was initially known as the Martlet. Standing at 9 feet 2 inches with a wingspan of 38 feet, a length of 28 feet 9 inches, and an empty weight of 5,500 pounds. Armed with 4 wing-mounted 50 caliber machine guns, this pugnacious plane looked every bit the rugged combatant. The Wildcat was powered by a supercharged version of the Pratt Whitney R1830 Twin Wasp radial engine, which provided around 1,200 horsepower, allowing it to reach speeds up to 318 miles per hour. However, US Navy pilots were greatly dissatisfied with the Wildcat's inferior performance against the Zero in the battles of the Coral Sea and Midway. The Wildcat was outperformed by the more maneuverable and longer-ranged Mitsubishi A6M0, which were also faster by 13 miles per hour. This performance difference accounted for a relatively poor kill ratio of just 6.9 to 1, gained from the most widely employed tactic during the Guadalcanal campaign, high-altitude ambush. In instances of one-on-one dogfights, the Wildcat was woefully outclassed by the Zero. In his post-Battle of Midway action report, US Navy Commander Jimmy Thatch wrote, "It is indeed surprising that any of our pilots returned alive. Any success our fighter pilots may have had against the Japanese Zero fighter is not due to the performance of the airplane we fly, but is the result of the comparatively poor marksmanship of the Japanese, stupid mistakes made by a few of their pilots, and superior marksmanship and teamwork of some of our pilots. The F4F airplane is pitifully inferior in climb, maneuverability and speed. Teamwork was right. Thatch devised a defensive tactic that allowed Wildcat formations to act in a coordinated maneuver to counter a diving attack, called the Thatch Weave. To effect the move, 2 or more Allied planes wove in regularly intersecting flight paths to lure an enemy into focusing on one plane, while the targeted pilot's wingman would come into position to attack the pursuer. This innovation was key, as it focused on the one advantage the Wildcat had: durability. The fighter's sturdy construction, combined with its self-sealing fuel tanks, cockpit armor, including bulletproof glass, meant it could withstand considerable damage and still return to its carrier. The Grumman airframe could survive far more damage than its lightweight, unarmored Japanese rival. As well, many US Navy fighter pilots were saved by the Wildcat's ZB homing device, which allowed them to find their carriers in poor visibility, provided they could get within the 30-mile range of the homing beacon. Grumman halted production of the Wildcat in early 1943 to focus on its successor, the F6F Hellcat, a decision that signaled a new era for the naval aircraft. Despite this shift, General Motors picked up the baton and continued manufacturing Wildcats for both the US Navy and Fleet Air Arm. Initially, General Motors produced the FM-1, mirroring the F4F4 model, but with only 4 guns. As time went on, the focus switched to the FM-2, a superior variant. This improvement was based on Grumman's XF4F8 prototype, informally dubbed the Wilder Wildcat, and was specifically tailored for small carrier operations. It featured a more robust engine and an elongated tail to handle the increased torque. Starting in 1943, Wildcats began to take on new roles. Equipped with bomb racks, they were predominantly assigned to escort carriers to engage submarines and assault ground targets. Their continued prowess was evident, as they still managed to bring down Japanese fighters, bombers, and kamikaze planes. Larger, more advanced fighters like the Hellcat and the Corsair became essential aboard fleet carriers. But the Wildcat's slower landing speed made it an ideal choice for carriers with shorter flight decks. A stirring moment in the Wildcat's history occurred during the Battle off Samar on October 25, 1944. Here, the escort carriers of Task Unit 7743, known as Taffy 3, along with their destroyer escorts, found themselves as the lone defenders against a formidable Japanese fleet, threatening vulnerable troop transports and supply ships at Leyte in the Philippines. In a desperate act of resistance, lightly armed Avengers and FM-2 Wildcats from Taffy's 1, 2, and 3 employed unorthodox tactics, such as strafing ships. This audacious move even targeted the bridge of the Japanese battleship Yamato. Simultaneously, destroyers and destroyer escorts fearlessly engaged the enemy. The unexpected ferocity of this defense coupled with considerable inflicted damage, led the Japanese fleet to retreat, showcasing the Wildcat's adaptability and the courage of those who piloted them. Interestingly, the Royal Navy's experience with the Wildcat is recorded as vastly more positive. Even before the Wildcat had been purchased by the US Navy, the French Navy and the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm, FAA, had ordered the Wildcat with their own configurations. Unfortunately, the French never received their order, as they had succumbed to the blitzkrieg advance of the Nazis prior to delivery. Their planes were diverted to the FAA. The Grumman F4F, initially referred to as the Martlet in British service, was adopted by the Fleet Air Arm as a temporary replacement for the Fairey Fulmar. The Fulmar, a two-seat fighter, offered good range but was outperformed by single-seater adversaries. The navalised Supermarine Spitfires were not an option, as the Royal Air Force had pressing needs for them. The F4F's first combat victory in the European theatre occurred on Christmas Day 1940. A land-based Martlet achieved a remarkable feat by downing a Junkers Ju-88 bomber over the Scapa Flow naval base. This achievement marked the first time a US-built fighter, serving in the British forces, claimed a combat victory during World War II. The Wildcat, particularly the Martlet variant, also blazed trails by initiating combat operations from smaller escort carriers. In September 1941, 6 Martlets embarked on the former German merchant vessel HMS Audacity, displaying their prowess by shooting down several Luftwaffe FW-200 Condor bombers. This engagement was part of highly effective convoy escort missions, such as Convoy HG-76 to Gibraltar in December 1941, where Wildcats first tasted aerial combat at sea. Britain's FAA received 300 Eastern Aircraft FM-1s, labelled Martlet 5s, in 1942-43, followed by 340 FM-2s, now named Wildcat 6s, aligning with the US designation. In total, the FAA operated nearly 1,200 Wildcats. By January 1944, the moniker Martlet was abandoned in favour of the universally recognised Wildcat. Notably, in March 1945, Wildcats claimed 4 Messerschmitt Bf 109s over Norway, marking the FAA's final Wildcat victories. Esteemed British test pilot Eric M. Winkle Brown reflected on the aircraft's legacy, stating, "I would still assess the Wildcat as the outstanding naval fighter of the early years of World War II. I can vouch as a matter of personal experience, this Grumman fighter was one of the finest shipboard aeroplanes ever created." In a poignant finale, Wildcats played a significant role in the last air raid of the war in Europe. During Operation Judgment on May 5, 1945, 28 Wildcat's 6th aircraft from 3 naval air squadrons flew from escort carriers to attack a U-boat depot near Harstad, Norway. The successful mission resulted in the sinking of 2 ships and a U-boat, albeit with the loss of 1 Wildcat and 1 Grumman Avenger torpedo bomber. The Wildcats' contribution to the Fleet Air Arm and their role in naval aviation is a story marked by courage, innovation, and undeniable success.